We're on. We're on. Okay, let's sit down, everybody. How do you want us here? Just sit down. Yeah.
Same order?
Yeah, same order. It'd be good. Per, maybe you sit there and I'll sit at the. Yeah, you can sit there. Okay, am I here?
Yeah, you are there.
Okay, just to make it easy. So, are we okay to go? We're good to go. You guys ready with the presentation back there? Audience is ready? You guys fired up? I don't want to see any tired people out there just because it's at the end of the day, right? This is the most exciting, most relevant highlight of the entire trade show. So all you people out there, come join us for this incredibly interesting presentation that we're going to have here today. My name is Patrick Frisk, and I'm going to kick you off with a few slides before I present the people that are with me here on stage today. We are a textile-to-textile recycling company called Reju with a very defined purpose of what we do to unlock infinite possibilities within finite resources. That's why we get up every day at Reju, to make sure we're trying to make progress against that. And we have this beautiful vision of a world designed to last. That's how we think about what we do. And we're focused on the biggest problem: post-consumer textile waste. Now, what we're going to hear from some of our panelists here today is why this is such a big problem and why we need to get on with this problem and addressing it as soon as we possibly can. As you can see up here, you know, the problem that we have is that we throw away an awful lot of textile today at the end of life. And it's going either into landfills or being incinerated. It's happening across Europe, it's happening across the US, it's happening across Asia. And if we don't start to actually address this, we're going to be in a whole heck of a lot of hurt in the not too distant future. And that's also part of what's driving policy, especially here in Europe, but also on a state-by-state basis in the US right now. What's really interesting and what should drive everybody's attention to the urgency of this, and I'm going to quote, I see Adam back there. Hi, Adam, how are you? From Textile Exchange. He was up here on stage yesterday. And some of the numbers that I'm using here, Adam, are your numbers, right? So in terms of the growth of textile fiber in the world, and when you look at this growth, it has shown no sign of slowing down right into the future. What's interesting is the composition of this textile growth. We've seen over the last 2 reported years from Textile Exchange the growth of polyester alone really being the growth driver of textile fibers. 15 million tons of growth over the last 2 years, from 22 to 24, and all of that growth is virgin polyester essentially. Now, when you project what's going on in the recycled polyester space over the next 10 years, the estimate number there in terms of production will be about 17 million tons at the end of 2035. Now, how does that relate to what everybody's talking about in here, right? Which has been so interesting, the shift in this landscape in 1 year to textile recycled materials and circularity. Well, we'll be at about 8 million tons of polyester at the end of that decade. 8 million. Now, remember what I just said. The growth in virgin polyester as a growth factor of overall fiber just in the last 2 years was 15 million tons. So if you don't get a sense of urgency after hearing that, I'd be very surprised, because this is a generational effort that we're all in for. Everybody needs to do their part, but make no mistake, there's going to be scarcity here, people. Big time in the next decade. So a circular textile system is what we're trying to also, of course, all work towards. And we believe that that's absolutely essential, you know, from a Reju perspective. We believe it's so important that we actually created what we call the Circular Textile Coalition about 2 weeks ago, and we announced it at the Textile Exchange Conference, because it isn't just about what happens in this room. It isn't just about what happens in the textile industry, and that's why we have some super interesting people here on stage today to talk about not just what's happening upstream, what's happening as we talk about technology and recycling, but also what happens downstream. We need to take the full circular view to be able to have an effect, because it doesn't matter if you have the right technology, right? If you can't get what you need to get to do your job, to recycle, and you get it at the right place, the right time, with the right quality, you're not going to be able to do your job. And then ultimately, we're not going to be able to supply the industry what the industry needs. And we're not going to be able to mitigate the problem that's building out there. So on me stage here with me, I have Mark from Coleo, Head of Strategy. I have Marie from Boston Consulting Group. And I have Per from Didrikson. So we have representation of actually another recycler, Mark, and BCG, who's just made a huge waste study of all textiles in Europe in the last 3-4 months. Marie is going to add some color to that. And then Per, of course, who ultimately makes stuff. So I'm hoping to have a great conversation here with these people on stage and then take your questions. So here we go. Okay. So we're going to start off with this question here. Let's start with you, Mark, then. Why do you believe circularity is so important going forward in what you do? And if you could start by telling people what your company does, please, I think it would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Well, basically, Coleo is an industrial scale-up based in Barcelona with activities that range from CMT to weaving, spinning, and mechanical recycling, and sorting and preparing materials for recycling. So we are waste managers, so we receive textile waste coming at their end of life, and we sort it by composition and color for recycling. So we started in this journey just to source ourselves. So as Patrick was saying, if you have nobody that provides you what you need at the right time and with the right specifications for what you want to do, it's impossible to do it. And so that was our realization. And so we started the journey of vertical integration until we developed this new business unit around waste management. And we produce around 2 million units of garments with at least 60% textile-to-textile content coming from our factories per year, and we manage around 5,000 tons of textile waste per year, also, to give like a rough number. And circularity is key for us, basically because we come from being a near-shoring supplier, and we think that it's basically what has helped us survive in this last year. So nearshoring and proximity have struggled a little in the last years. But this shift towards circularity and building a system in a way that you can get back the waste and provide a special product is a source of competitive advantage for nearshoring. Basically, being close to the source of the raw material, which is something that in Europe we never had, and we're always complaining. It's a competitive advantage if you know how to play it.
It's come full circle, basically, right? We're really kind of back to where we were. Thank you very much for that, and we'll come back to you a little bit later on. So what about you, Marie? I mean, you've just gone through this massive study of post-consumer textile waste in Europe, and you also looked at post-industrial, but why is it so important with circularity, do you believe, going forward?
I think, when you look at the textile industry, you see many differences with other industries. When you look at steel, it's about 90% of the steel that is being, thrown into waste that is recycled into new steel. When you talk about paper, that's 60%. And then when you talk about textile, that falls to 1%. And globally, it's about 120 million tons of textile waste that we produce each year. So that's an enormous amount. And then you think only 1% of that gets recycled into new textiles. So obviously, there is a huge opportunity here in the textile industry to be able to make this industry circular and be able to capture those enormous volumes of waste to become new textiles and preventing virgin pets, etc. Like all of those other textiles which are very useful to us today, but could be prevented tomorrow. So I think this is where, at BCG, we see the opportunity in textile. It's comparing to other industries and understanding that there is a huge shift that needs to happen in this industry to make that possible.
And you didn't see in your research any signs that this aggregation of textile would really slow down, did you?
No, absolutely not. When we try to look forward into what that volume could look like tomorrow and more like in 10 years, we saw that number increasing significantly. And that's due to two factors. Either you have populations that's growing in certain areas of the world, or you have the purchasing power of those population that is growing. So those two factors together, they really make it so that the volume of textile that is being purchased each year is only increasing and will only continue to increase over time. And thus, with a 5-year kind of timeline, that becomes waste in 5 years. And so everything that you purchase today is becoming waste in 5 years. So that number, is only increasing, and we're not seeing that slowing down.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen also some of the latest numbers now in terms of the speed that's being disposed of is actually increasing, and there's a lot of discussion on especially the fast fashion, where that cycle is actually shorter, closer to 3. Okay, Per, over to the branded side here. What about you? What about Didrikson? And you guys have always been in the forefront of thinking through circularity for a long time now, and I know some of the projects that you've done with nylon, for example, in a full circular way. How are you guys thinking about circularity as you look at it today and we see the shift here in the industry? What's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, you said it right. The shift in the industry is totally crazy. I'm a textile engineer in the beginning, and I've been in the industry for almost 20 years and doing a lot of material developments during the years. I've been having the privilege of traveling a lot to these production sites all over the world, Taiwan, Japan, wherever. So I've got some know-how about how things works. And as you said, Patrick, now I have the privilege to work for Didrikson, who is a functional lifestyle brand doing jackets in Sweden. So I think I represent a bit smaller brand. We had a lot of huge brands on the stage these days, but there's also a lot of small brands that need support and now also needs increased knowledge of what we need to do and what we need to address to get this going. And how we have been thinking, I mean, we are a 100-year-old company, so we also have a history to protect, and we also think, how should we stay in the business 100 more years? We need to think differently. And from the beginning, we, of course, want to prioritize quality, because we also know that for our consumers, they love us because we have always focused on durable garments. So we haven't had a big marketing team or big marketing spend. It's just mouth to mouth, products that has been last for a long time. And that's why we also did a project for nylon, which is durable. But we also I saw many years ago, the increasing demand of polyester in the business as such. So we did research and tried to make a recyclable, waterproof garment. So I think what we can do is to inspire and share what we are doing, and we will not turn the business around from a turnover perspective, but hopefully we can help each other out. We need to be partners in the whole value chain, and we need to know the value chain, both upstreams and downstreams, and we need to align on somehow a system that is long-term sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's great, Per, and I think it's long-term and sustainable. So I think, as you think about, this idea of circularity, if you like, right? It's not a new idea. You were basically back to where we began, right, at one point to some extent. And is this about suddenly giving up all of the, old ways of doing things? Absolutely not, right? Again, remember what I said when I started up here today. This is going to take a very, very long time to build this capacity for true post-consumer textile to textile recycling. And it's not that we should not do, of course, post-industrial recycling. Of course we should. But the problem, it doesn't sit there. The problem sits with post-consumer textiles. So we have to address that. That's also playing into policy, which we talked about before. And I wanted to ask you, Marie, as you've been doing your work, how important do you think policy is to help drive what's currently going on? It's not just here in Europe, it's also EPR, for example, in the US. But how important do you think it is to ignite, let's say, the right behavior and the right initiatives?
I think this is the key word, ignite, right? policy needs to be the accelerator in this business. I think we're seeing, there are too much discourse around the inability to find funding or the inability to grow our infrastructures and expand them, whether that's collection and sorting or even recycling. I think policy needs to be the key element that is put into place in order to drive that willingness to change, and that's from EPR, as you said, in Europe, but not only, globally also, that's very key. But making sure also that those rules apply evenly to the different countries and that it's and the different brands and so on. Because I think this is the challenge also, when you look at Europe, you have so many different countries and they operate their waste systems in such a different way. And this is the struggle that we have today with the European policy. Sometimes it's the inability to make sure that what we implement, like the segregated collection of textiles, for example, is going to be implemented in the same way everywhere. So it's a necessary accelerator, and it goes from making sure that we shift the behavior of businesses and individuals alike. So like I said, from collecting textile and making sure that you put it in the right bin and not in the one that you throw away your food with. And it also goes to new ways of finding funding, because to achieve the level of infrastructure and the capacities that we need, it won't just be public funding. It needs to come from the responsibility of brands. It needs to come from the responsibility of everyone, really. So, necessary accelerator, really.
Yeah, and we've also Mark, you want to say something?
I like to say that circularity is like an equation with too many unknowns. No, and we're trying to solve it, so everybody's a bit paralyzed because they're trying to solve the unknowns they have. And I think the role of policy is at least clearing some of those unknowns. So in a way that we can ignite is the perfect word. You ignite the movement by clearing some of these unknowns on this very complex equation.
So one question for you. You're not just a waste collector and aggregator and sorter. You also make stuff. So, we talk a lot about nearshoring, reshoring, and it's a topic here in certainly Europe, but very much a topic in the US. And speaking from my own experience, right, when I ran Under Armour, which was the last large brand that I ran, I had 50% of my production in Asia, 25% in the Mediterranean basin, 25% in the Americas. So I know it can be done, right? But from your perspective today, is it a pipe dream?
I don't think so. I think it can be done completely. So in reality, the situation today with proximity is more that, so it was a reality some years ago. So in Spain and Portugal, and Turkey can still consider proximity. They had very strong supply chains. It's true that in the last years it has been damaged, but I think that circularity is an opportunity to make to make this nearshoring a reality, which is good for everybody because it helps us on the waste problem. If we focus on post-consumer, obviously, but it helps us on the waste problem. It gives us, I would say, like a strategical reliance. So and now everybody talks about supply chain strategical approach and all this. But I think that sometimes. So profit is very important, and retailers and brands lose a bit sight of the strategical part of having a distributed supply chain and taking advantage of that.
It's about resilience, right, to a large extent. How difficult is it, Per, for a brand to adjust some of that production to a nearshore strategy versus perhaps in many cases where you've had all of it in one place, or at least most of it in one place? How hard is it to do? Do we have to relearn things? Do we have to re-engage to some extent? Is that what needs to happen, you think?
Totally, I think. We are talking about how to getting waste back, but it doesn't stop there. We need to know the whole supply chain, both upstreams and downstreams, and we need to work together. Talking about changing things, it will take time. Take an example of if you want to scale something from a small brand perspective. I've been working almost 8 years now trying to consolidate the supply chain in order to have a benefit for both us as a brand, but of course also for the partners that we have. I think there is so much running around and talking about minimum quantities and stuff like that. And I had a good example on stage earlier that somebody said that it's not so difficult to get everything going. It's just to go to the tier 4 supplier and make sure that you put the supply chain together. But I know that there is many brands that don't have the knowledge of going and digging all the way back to a tier 4 supplier, because the time of going from pellets and have the supply chain of what yarn I want for the designer's needs to create the product in the final end, that takes time. And if you consolidate your supply chain and using one yarn for many different applications, that conversion will take time for many brands.
And I think, I don't know what you think here on stage, but I think that's the opportunity, right? I mean, the opportunity is actually that the numbers that I showed you before on how long it will take to scale this, that's also the opportunity, right? The danger is that we wait too long, right, to engage and actually get going. And I think it's interesting when we talk about cost and things too, and you've done now a lot of work on the waste, and you know the waste really well too. There is no such thing as free waste, right? I mean, the cost of the waste is real.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's it's a cost that we feel as a company. I mean, I'm sure you feel that much more, but it's what will help support our infrastructure going forward. You know, it can't be free. I mean, it can be free technically, but you need to also account for the fact that to make this system kind of work all together, you need to find a solution that works for everyone, for the collectors, for the sorters, for the recyclers, and that's, again, another equation that's difficult to tackle, I think.
Yes, I think absolutely, and ultimately there is a need for investment in the infrastructure, right, Mark? I mean, in terms of how to think about that, all that upstream infrastructure that has to be built to handle very large volumes. Not a lot of it exists today, and the people that do exist in that has been relying, not like yourself on a vertical, but actually on a second-hand market, for example, they're having a lot of issues today, right?
Yeah, completely. So the only real at-scale business model around textile waste until now was second-hand, and mostly for export second-hand. So almost all the capacities we have is around that way of working. And well, it's a business model that's under a lot of stress recently. So we have been seeing in France and well in Germany and in many locations a lot of struggle of this kind of companies or charities that work around that. And this part of the value chain, which is sorting for recycling at scale and in volume, it's completely non-existent almost. There are some capacities like ours, no, based on fulfilling our own demand. But to make this go beyond that, we need much more. We need security, and we need to be able to make this business model viable around sorting for recycling. It can be through the price of the waste, not that we're able to sell, or it can be also through EPR funds, or we will see how it ends up looking. But it's a big shift.
And you saw a lot of this when you did your research too, right? How the system that has been, like you said, under the surface, the rewear resell market that was a business model for a very long time is now crumbling, right?
Yeah, I think you see a lot of companies that are going bankrupt or insolvent, or they're kind of crying for help to the governments, like Le Relais in France, for example, kind of dumped a lot of textile in front of official kind of brands, you know, to just highlight how much of an issue that was. And, you know, going back to the topic that we were discussing earlier, that is not slowing down at all. The volumes of waste that we're going to have to tackle is not slowing down. So if they're already overwhelmed with the volumes that we have today, it's a whole issue for tomorrow, and we need to really tackle the issue today, because tomorrow it will be too late probably. So it's about, you know, finding ways of making sure that we can fund the development of those infrastructures. And like you said, it's probably not a single clear-cut solution. It's probably a lot of different components that need to come together and make the best solution for everyone.
Per, I think you have a really interesting story to tell about what you found out about your waste, right? Because you've had some projects around this. Maybe you can share that.
Yeah, it's very funny, but I 100% support. We do need incentives to take away costs for these second-hand or change the consumer behavior to realize the value of the products and where you can go with it for either it's for secondhand or recycling. But yeah, we had a funny story in Sweden where we had the EPR implemented, and Borås, where we are located, which are very known for textiles in Sweden, started from a government level to collect textile waste, and they had to close down a couple of months later because they were overwhelmed with textiles. But we need to get things going, right? So what we did, we partnered up with them, and we had a project where they started to sort out this textile waste. So they sorted out a fraction with our old products for us, which was super interesting.
So specific Didrikson product.
We were a couple of brands in this project. So they are sorting out from the waste our Didrikson's products. And we got now in HQ, I don't know, it's like 50 or 100 kilograms of waste. But it was super interesting findings with garments. Since we are 100 years old, we found really nice, cool products from the 70s, from the 80s, and from the 90s. And from my opinion, there is no end of life. Those should be on the second-hand market, most of it. But of course, there was some waste as well.
Yeah,
but
that's interesting, because when you start to learn a lot about the waste, right, and we do a lot of work at Reju around waste, we understand, you know, the waste, the full problem all the way upstream. And why is that? Well, we're going to be very dependent on it, right, in the future. We're going to need to build a new pipeline that's not oil. It's a new raw material, right? It's textile waste. We need to have it coming into our facility we're building in Camelot, Holland, 14 to 15 trucks of this stuff a day. So we're very dependent on this entire supply chain working. And when you see what happens in the hierarchy of textile waste, you learn a lot. A lot of the markets that have existed in terms of secondhand have been dependent on the content of products that can be salvaged out of all that waste, right? Because that is actually the value. And then, at the bottom of the hierarchy, so to speak, is the stuff that you've been able to export. Well, what is happening is it's not just more waste. The quality of the waste is going down. And the other problem that you have is the fact that it isn't just the quality that's going down, which also skews your yield numbers, right? You get less cream or less good stuff that you can take out for the same volume. It is also the fact that what comes out at the bottom, you can't ship it anywhere any longer. You used to be able to ship it to a lot of different places. Not possible anymore. Why? A number of different reasons. One reason is the fact that we have wars going on, right? And a big secondhand market for European textiles used to be Russia, for example. Not so easy to ship there anymore, right? Even into the Middle East, we used to ship a lot. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on there too. Africa, we used to ship a lot and still shipping a lot. But we also have competition there now from China coming into Africa. And also we have new business models. It's much cheaper to buy from some online players than it is to buy secondhand. So competing with the secondhand market. So very difficult situation. And if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, that was actually one of the solutions that we all thought was going to be able to eat up a lot of this waste, was actually the secondhand market, because we saw a trend of that increasing. Well, now the growth of waste has way outstripped that, and the fact that you're getting a hard time, getting your waste placed in different markets is making it very, very difficult for this, current system that exists. So that's why it's so fragile. So that's to give you an idea of the problems we're having with the waste. So this is an opportunity then, right? It's an opportunity to take that and actually turn it into something we can use again, right? That's really the optimal effort that we should all be engaged with. So in terms of how you think, Mark, about the waste that you're currently now handling, are you seeing an increase in waste in your channels in terms of how you're now handling this on a day-to-day basis?
So yeah, we're seeing an increase because we are going more and more into post-consumer. So our model started more on post-industrial and pre-consumer waste. So by doing let's say, zero waste projects for our customers. And we have been opening to post-consumer. This year we will end up with 50% of the waste that gets into our plants. And well, we see this crisis because more and more people is using us as a last resource emergency offtake for the waste that they're not able to export anymore. And also the big shift is with EPRs. So if EPRs, so we have started working with refashion with French waste, and if you're able to have some kind of fee for treating the waste, which is an activity that has to be done, that makes a whole difference. Because just relying on demand as it is now, it's not enough to make this business model go at scale. So let's say you can make it go through for some volumes, but to make it go for what we need, it's not enough.
So that's an interesting view, right? Because I think with all of this waste that's available, you'd think it was easily accessible, right? It's not. Why not? Because we are not aggregating textile waste yet. Yes, we have some coming in through secondhand, sure, but we're not aggregating at scale anywhere in the world. We are not sorting at scale anywhere in the world. We are not preparing for recycling at scale anywhere in the world. And what do I mean by preparation? Taking out disruptors for a chemical process means you have to take out zippers and buttons and other disruptive potential things that could interrupt, the chemical process. So since none of that is done at scale, right? So to Mark's point here is right now, even if we had the factories built, we wouldn't work because the effort to get the amount of textile waste that we need, right, to solve or at least starting to address the problem is not possible. So that's why it's so essential that the understanding here is about a circular system, right? It has to be connected. Everybody has to do their part. That means an interconnected system. Otherwise, it's not really going to work going forward. So I've been told, Charles, 30 minutes on and then 15 minutes for Q&A. We promised you that, so that's where we're at right now. I'd just like, if you wouldn't mind, just summarize, right? So post-consumer textile waste in the Western world today, as well as in Asia, is a huge, huge, huge concern. That's why you see all of this drive towards policy and regulation, is because we have to come to terms with it. On top of that, the old ways of getting rid of some of that waste is not really working anymore, and it's very, very fragile right now. So there's a sense of urgency with that. A plan needs to be made for how we deal with this going forward, number one. Number two, it needs to be connected. It's about a circular effort, and it's about circular effort where everybody does their part, and that's what I'm hoping you're hearing here. We don't see it abating, and the problem we have very often with this is, as we think about that, we don't do the aggregated math, right? This is build on build on build on build, so huge problem. Technology is not the issue anymore as it relates to recycling. I'd like to make that clear. We're dealing with known chemistry here. It's no hocus pocus, right? It's known stuff. So it is about investment ultimately. You've got to build it. And to be able to build it, you need also participation downstream. And let's take away the notion that you can't make anything near shore or reshore. It's not true. Listen, I've been in this industry for 35 years. I've run some pretty big brands. But it is about work, right? You have to change the way that you do things. You have to adjust. We all have to adjust, right, to come to terms with this. Thank you. Charles.
First up, I want to say, can us people in the audience show our appreciation for those on stage? The reason why I want to give them a bit of praise is that it gives you a bit of time to think of questions. Now, the reason why we like having Patrick is Patrick makes it simple. We don't have to do complicated thinking. He's summarized it really well. He's given us direction that we need to do. If we as an industry want to move up to that level and get rid of the poor reputation of textiles, Patrick has given us a really simple answer. Is it too hard to follow? But that's a reflective question. So I'm looking around. Because if you guys don't ask questions, then I start to get into techie ones. Here's your opportunity. And I'm going to start calling out people like Adam, who knows a lot more about recycling than most of us, if no one else asks questions.
Was it that clear, Charles? Oh my God, that's amazing.
Patrick, I believe that small company with 2 F's and V's that you used to work in has made you quite a clear communicator. Well, I'm going to kick off with the first question, and it's a really low-level dumb question. Why aren't we doing it? What is the hurdle? What is the barrier? Because you guys have painted a wonderful picture. The technology's there, the knowledge is there. Why aren't we doing it?
I think it's very simple. We haven't had to.
Is everyone aware, by the way, that the legislation which is coming in affecting polyester, Textile Exchange say 98% of the feedstock for recycled polyester is from waste bottles, and in Europe, that's going to be lawed out within a couple of years. We're losing 98% of the feedstock for recycled polyester. We need to do something different. The easiest solution is put more textiles into the system. If we can't get them from bottles, we have polyester. Let's put it back into the system. But I'm still looking for people asking questions. Otherwise, I get to ask them a bit more techie.
Go for it.
Okay. I'm hearing a lot of talk now about how we're doing metrics and how we're assessing things. And we know recycled yarns are lower impact. We've got the wool lot on next. The Higg index for wool starts at about 30, but for recycled wool, it's 1. Polyesters are 12, 13, 14. Why are they half the value of wool? So the question is leading to now, we have fossil carbon, we have products that are using carbon from an ancient source versus carbon from a biogenic, a natural, a regular day-to-day source. Do you see much difference when you're looking at the assessment methods of how we calculate what's good and what's bad? In other words, we've got a whole variety of materials. Are we counting them in the right way?
You know, it's an interesting question, and you know what I love, by the way, Charles, I think everybody appreciates this. You know, we've had a lot of different points of view up here, and there's certainly a lot of contrarian views to what should come first, you know, what should come second, and what have you. The reality today is that in our industry, there's not one way to measure things, right? There's not one body that will give us the, let's say, the path or the answer. I must say that Adam at Textile Exchange is doing an awesome job in really managing what they can manage, and I think that's very helpful, I think, to the entire industry. I think also Blue Sign does a good job in terms of how they think about, you know, the chemistry and what have you, and there are others. But I think when you come to the choices that we make, right? You know, ultimately, when you talk about polyester, we are using a finite resource. So we can all debate on how long we're going to have that resource or not. I happen to be part of one of the largest engineering companies in the world that deal with things like natural gas and sustainable aviation fuels and what have you. So I guess we have a little bit of an idea of how long that's going to last. And the question would be, is using it for textiles the best use of what we have left or not? Question mark. If you can actually recycle it, and you can do so using less carbon emissions. I think one of the things that if you haven't had a chance to read the BCG report, I think one of the interesting things is in that report is that if we choose to do nothing versus if we choose to actually action this and try to get to these 8 million tons or whatever you have in 10 years, could be the difference of about 5 million tons of carbon a year, which is about heating up about 625,000 houses a year. Now, you think about that. That's every year. That's just the beginning, right? So, yeah, is that important? I think so, right? And I think the other part is, if we don't do anything, what are we going to do with all the waste, right? So are we going to burn it and create even more carbon or not? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I think we have to be a bit pragmatic, right? We should try to do things that we can affect and not try to deliver too much on this or that because, you know, time is, clock is ticking. I'm not just saying that because I'm old. It is true, right? The clock is ticking. So we got to get on with it because even if we do our very, very, very best, and I am very, very, very lucky, right? Because I'm part of a very large company. I don't have private equity behind me. I don't have venture capital. I'm wholly owned by one of the largest engineering companies. I don't have the issue that some of my brethren have in this industry. Even with that, I can't build it any quicker. It's impossible. So we have to begin. Because otherwise, we're not going to be able to address many of the problems: carbon, waste, and also ultimately resilience for the industry, right? We have to build resilience back into this industry.
And on that note, just to wrap up, could I do two things? Firstly, we keep on referring to him. Adam, can you stick up your hand? Because Adam has joined Textile Exchange, and go on, Adam, be a bit more proud of yourself. He is turning around the textile industry on recycled fibres. He deserves a bit of praise. He doesn't want the claim to fame, but I've got a question over here to go for as well.
Thank you for the nice discussion. Patrick, I have a question. My name is Momo, and I'm from Sembis, an innovation company, a bit far from Limburg, that your big plant is going to work, in Drenthe, in Holland. And my question is how innovation companies, like innovative companies, they can help in this. Like, for instance, replacing Lycra with TPE to be a mono material, like polyester, but elastic and plastic, or using like chemical dyed or sustainable dyed instead of dope dyed yarns, or how the innovative companies can help in making recycling more feasible and better and economic?
I think that's a great question. And I think, you know, one of my biggest arguments with Eurotex, for example, which is the governing body for, or the industry organization for textiles in Europe, is exactly that, right? Why are we not looking at this as an opportunity? Why are we not looking at this as an opportunity for innovation, right? Why are we not looking at this as an opportunity for jobs, right? Why are we not looking at this as an opportunity for reindustrialization? I don't understand. So my answer to you is absolutely. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for innovation by a lot of different companies in this industry if we get on with it. We have a tremendous amount of upstream conversations, making sure that, you know, how do we think about waste, right? But more importantly, also downstream, how do we think about yarns? How do we think about fabrics, right? How do we think about these things going forward? And I think one of the things that is close to heart for Per, to answer that question, maybe is around quality, for example, or durability. Maybe you want to say something.
Yeah, I have many things to say, but I also have an answer for your question. Yes, we are thinking more monomaterials, so no matter what we are producing, we should also design for easier recyclability, but we would, I mean, the pants I'm wearing is an example where we're taking out, it's 100% polyester steel with stretch and very durable. So we are balancing as a brand. It's very difficult to prioritize now because you should balance our prioritization is durability, so prolong the lifetime of the garment, right? So we will not forget about quality because we need still, even though how we handle textiles, we need to keep very qualitative garment and change the behavior, consumer behavior, and use the garments for longer time. That's the biggest impact we can do, or reduction we can do. Use the garments longer and more. So that's the durability part, right? And then you will do the durability with lower impact. So finding better processes with lower impact. But it should also, hopefully, with kept durability, kept quality, in the end, be recyclable. And the more monomaterial it can be, of course, you get the bigger yield out. So it's a balance of all these three parameters, and as for brands, now with all the legislations coming from everywhere, you should know your upstream supply chain, you need to know the tier 4 suppliers to get the right pellets, right? It's one of the biggest challenges we have is how do you prioritize? You need to have a long-term strategy to get this working and consistency in what you're doing.
So I would create a new software to be able to help him with that. How about that? All right, there you go.
Patrick, straight to the point, nice and clean. But I'm going to have to ask you to close the panel so we can get the next ones on.
Okay, I'd like to thank all of you for being part of this today. It's been great. Thank you very much. And I would like all of you to please give these people a big hand for participating. Thank you. Thank you very much, Charles. We're ready to go.